All right. Everybody, what we're going to do, what I do every time is to review just a little bit. And a couple of reasons I do that. There's 12 chapters in Daniel, and I have probably over 100 hours studying the book of Daniel in Bible college and other places. And it used to be extremely hard for me in 12 sessions, in 12 hours, to put into your head what I studied for 100 hours, okay? So this is why every Wednesday night, we go back and review a bit before we get in to Daniel chapter 5 tonight. And that'll also let people that have not been here, give them an opportunity to get on board and catch up, all right? So I'm going back here to Daniel chapter number 1 and to begin to review what has happened. I've got some things for you tonight, but I'm not going to give them to you yet because I want you to hear what I'm saying before you start looking at these. Now, in the first chapter of Daniel, we learned in the first couple of verses that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and he besieged it. He conquered it. He overthrew it. And when he did, he leveled the temple in Jerusalem and he stole all the holy artifacts out of the temple. The menorah, huge menorah, the golden vessels, all of those things, and carried them back along with Daniel and a big portion of the Hebrews back to Babylon. The reason he did that was it was a battle of the gods. All of the fighting and warring that they did over there in that part of the world then, behind that is my God is more powerful than your God. My God will give me the victory. So in stealing the artifacts out of the temple and carrying them back was a way to boast, I got your God's worship tools and things. So he took everything from the temple back to Babylon, along with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and probably half the Hebrews in the land. That was the first deportation. They did a second one a few years later. We came to Daniel chapter 2. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. God gave him this dream, and in that dream, he saw a vision, and that vision was of a huge soldier-looking type individual. And he didn't know what that meant. And so Daniel interpreted the dream for him. He told him what the dream was, and he also interpreted that dream. And in that dream, that statue contains 4 world empires. And Terry, if you would, give everybody one of those. That statue contains 4 world empires, and in these 4 world empires, we're going to cover the period of time from the fall of Jerusalem in 605 BC all the way to the end of the tribulation period in the book of Revelation. Now, everybody's got a copy. Now, keep in mind, the thing I want you to see is the proof and the authenticity of Daniel's interpretation of the king's dream that God gave him. You see this statue, and you see dates here. You see the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, and you see the dates, okay? Daniel did not have those dates. Those dates come from history. And those dates in each one of these four empires happened exactly as Daniel said it would, verifying through history that Daniel's interpretation of the king's vision was correct. All right? Now I'm going to show you some things about that tonight that I haven't before. Now, Daniel told King Nebuchadnezzar, you have a head of gold, shoulders and arms of silver, the torso and the thigh area of bronze, and then the legs were iron, and then the feet were a mixture of iron and clay. In what Daniel did not know is that in 395 AD, the Roman Empire would be split. And it did happen. The capital of that Roman Empire, I see I wrote it down here, was Constantinople. That was the something like that. Thank you, Lewis. Constantinople. All right. The capital of the other Roman Empire was Rome. So the leg that you see that has the toes broken off at the bottom, this is the Roman Empire that was in charge, in control of the known world at that time when Jesus came. Now, if you can see it in the copy down at the foot, if you can count them, there's actually 10 toes on one foot that are broken off of that foot. Can y'all see that? There's 10. All right? I counted them 4 times. There's 10 on one foot. We will learn as we go through the book of Daniel and into the book of Revelation that in the end, there will be a 10-nation federation over there in the Middle East.
In present day.
And at one point, it'll be up to 13 nations, I think. And they'll fight and war a bit, and it'll come back down to 10. And when it's back down to that 10, one of those nations, Daniel calls the little horn, will rise up. And out of that one will come the Antichrist.
Any prediction on what that is?
Are y'all tracking with me now? All right, this is an overview. This statue is an overview. Jesus called this the times of the Gentiles. Each one of these empires, the Babylonian Empire, the next one to follow it, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, they're all Gentiles. Israel, Jerusalem, has been captured, led away, and was scattered. In 1948, May the 14th, 1948, Israel became a nation again, but she's still scattered. And all of these toes are still warring against Israel, these Gentile toes that are represented here. And this is what you're seeing on the news. These different countries, these different nations that are attacking and fighting with the Jews. It's been happening since 605 BC. and there have always been Gentiles. We are Gentiles, okay? Now, where are we today on a timeline on this leg right here, the one with the 10 toes? Where are we right now?
At the ankle?
Thank you. We are at the ankle. Good, Charles. We are at the ankle. And so the rest of it is prophecy yet to be fulfilled. Okay? Now, what we're going to see tonight in Daniel chapter 5, go all the way back up to his shoulder, to his neck. Daniel said that the head of gold was King Nebuchadnezzar and that Babylonian empire. And it lasts from 605 to 539 BC. At that point, the Medes and the Persians are going to conquer Babylonia, and take over. That's what we're going to see happen tonight in Daniel chapter 5. All right. Is everybody clear on that and where we are so far? Okay. All right. Now, we should read Daniel chapter number 5. So turn there. And that first, you got the microphone? He's got the microphone. Okay, here we go. And what I want you to do is read the first 9 verses.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that king and his prince, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. In the same hour came fourth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's conscience was changed and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosened and his knees smote one against the other. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was the king Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his conscience was changed in him, and his lords were astonished.
All right, thank you. Okay, now let's put these first 9 verses here in perspective. You notice this is not Nebuchadnezzar. This is Belshazzar. There had been, I think, 4 kings after Nebuchadnezzar. Each one of them only served short periods of time. Some of them, I think, were assassinated, but they were very short kingships. Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's, it's either his son or his grandson. Not sure which. I think it's Nebuchadnezzar's son. Anyway, he is now on the throne in Babylon. And so what is happening here he decides to make a great feast for 1,000 of his lords. Now, let's put this in perspective. The king's palace is where the dining hall was, that they would have these banquets and things like that. Now, 1,000 of his lords, okay, you learn later on that included, not included in the 1,000, but added to the 1,000 lords. Each one of them would have several wives. They would have several concubines. They would have people that would attend them when they would come to these meetings. These lords were leaders that were appointed over different jobs and things to do in Babylon. And so the estimate is, from Bible scholars, there were probably 3,000 to 4,000, maybe 5,000 people there. Now, this dining hall and the king's palace there in Babylon has been unearthed. And the archaeologists tell us the dining hall was 170 feet by 52 feet, if you can imagine the size of that. That's bigger than the White House in Washington, D.C., okay? The dining hall. And so it's packed with several thousand of the leaders, their wives, their concubines, and Belshazzar is having a big party, all right? While he tasted the wine, he gave the command in verse 2 to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, okay? So when Nebuchadnezzar and his armies, when they besieged Judah and Jerusalem, and they leveled the temple, they stole all the things out of the temple. One of the things they stole was a huge menorah. You'd have to go back to find out exactly the size that God gave them to make that thing. Y'all know what a menorah is, okay? It's a candlestick that holds 7 candles, and it's golden. It's huge, and it represents Israel actually, and it was part of the worship. Now that thing was huge. Belshazzar had that thing set up. Look at verse 5. He had that thing set up with its back to the wall behind him where he was seated. Now, if I'm telling y'all anything wrong, it's been about 25 years since I studied all of this at Liberty. But within the last month, I'm studying it again, and my professor is Dr. David Jeremiah, okay? So, this is wrong. Anyway, all right. Now, I want you to notice something. They brought in the gold vessels in verse 3 that had been taken out of the temple and been brought to Jerusalem. And then they were drinking from the vessels. And they drank wine and they praised their gods. In the same hour, the fingers of a man appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand. You see there where it says opposite the lampstand? That's the menorah that Nebuchadnezzar stole out of the temple. It's behind Belshazzar sitting there on his dining hall throne. And it's huge. Now, Belshazzar had to turn around to see the writing on the wall. And for him to see the writing on the wall, he had to look right through that menorah that he stole from God in Jerusalem, or that his daddy did. And so it's behind him. And the hand starts to write on the plaster on the wall. Now, it's estimated by scholars because of the size of the menorah and the height of the wall in that dining hall, that hand that appeared and was writing on the wall was huge. It was bigger than a man. That makes you understand a little bit about verse 6 when it says the king's countenance changed and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosed and his knees not. Yeah, Brother Lewis.
You know what the NIV said? That his face turned pale and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking.
That's right. His knees were knocking. All right. So he calls in the astrologers and all the Chaldeans, and he's saying, what does it mean? What does this writing mean? He can't figure it out. All right. And he's just greatly troubled. All right. Now that brings us up to verse 10. Who's going to read verses 10 through 17? Who's got that? Get the mic.
The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of God of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel who is one of the captives from Judea, whom my father the king brought from Judea? I have heard of you, that the Spirit of the God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not give the interpretation of this thing. And I have heard of you that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation.
Okay. Now, the queen here in verse 10. Daniel is now probably 80, 85 years old. In chapter 1, he was probably 16, 18 years old, him and the three Hebrews. And so they were very young. 4 kings have passed. All right, time has passed. This queen could very well be Nebuchadnezzar's queen, who is still alive in there. And most scholars think that it was. Belshazzar may have not have even known about Daniel because of the time that had passed since Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It's been a long time. Daniel was a young man then. He is probably 80, 85 years old now. So Belshazzar may have not have even known Daniel or known about Daniel. But Nebuchadnezzar's queen, which would actually be his mother or grandmother, whichever, she did. She remembered him. So she tells Belshazzar about Daniel. That's what we have here. She's telling him about Daniel, and she's remembering what Daniel can do. And so then he calls on Daniel, and so now we're here to where Daniel has told him, I will make known to you the interpretation, and he's about to do it. Now, who's going to read the rest of this chapter? Get that microphone and begin in verse number 18 and go all the way through verse 31.
O thy king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, the father of kingdom, and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Who he would he slew, and whom he would be kept alive, and whom he set up, and whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy cubicans have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Medians took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Now, Daniel does a very, very brave thing here. He preached a sermon to the king, and you don't do that. He could have, if he didn't extend that golden scepter to people that came in, they were dead. And Daniel reminded Belshazzar of what happened to his father or grandfather, whichever Nebuchadnezzar was. He reminded him that he made him graze grass like an ox for 7 years. And if you all remember, and you can see this all the way through the book of Daniel, in its first half of the first 4 or 5 chapters, it's easy to see that while the Hebrews were in Babylon in captivity, while they were there, God blessed the Babylonians. God blessed Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel said it. He said, God has given you the greatest kingdom on the earth. And you can say who lives and who dies, and God blessed them. And then Nebuchadnezzar got the big head, and y'all remember last Wednesday night, he's walking around saying, look at the kingdom I built. And no sooner did the words come out of his mouth than God took his sanity. He winds up grazing grass and eating like an ox for 7 years. And so Daniel is reminding Belshazzar what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And that took some backbone in order for Daniel to do that to the king, who, if you remember, is already drunk and partying. But then one of the Bible commentators said that when his face turned white and his knees started knocking, it was the fastest sobering up anybody ever did in the history of consuming alcohol. He sobered up quick. But anyway, this is, like I said, the first 5 or 6 books of Daniel will prepare you for the disasters that lay ahead in the end times. And so Daniel was a man of faith. He was a man of courage. He stood up for what he believed. He didn't back down. He voiced his opinion, even when it could cost him his life. But so anyway, he reminded him that in verse 21, that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men. That's the thing God wanted Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar and all of us to know and understand. God puts kings in place and God takes them down. God is in control. So, anyway, so Daniel starts to interpret the writing on the wall. Now, this is in Aramaic. And in Aramaic, Upharsin and Tekel, Perez, Upharsin and Perez mean the same. They mean the same thing. And so, mene, that's there twice for emphasis. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. It's over. And tekel was a term that was used for a set of scales. And you have been weighed in the balances and you're coming up short. And then Perez, the word Perez or Upharsin literally means to divide. And what we're about to see here is that the kingdom of Babylon is about to be divided by the Medes and the Persians, 2 different peoples who have band together and are coming to try to overthrow Babylon. Now, Babylon at the time was the most fortified city in the known world. And it was huge. Its walls were extremely high and thick. Its gates could not be batterammed or ram-battered, whatever, how do you say that? You couldn't penetrate them. There was no way. You couldn't go over the walls. You couldn't go under the walls. There's no way to get in there. They had enough food stored in the city, the walled city of Babylon, to last them for 3 years. The Euphrates River ran either through it or near it. The Euphrates River, every river is small as its mouth, its beginning, and they get larger down the line as different tributaries, banks, and creatures, go into it. How big it was there then, I don't know. It was either the Babylonians had dug a canal and diverted water, or it was the river itself. I don't know which. But on each end of the walled city of Babylon, those huge walls, on each end of it, it was built like this. And dropping down from the bottom of that arch were rods, like jail bars, rods. They were built into the walls, and they went down into the river or the canal, whichever it was. They went down into it, deep into it. What Darius the Mede did, the Medes and the Persians, they went there and they dug a canal and they diverted the water into the plain of Dura, which was nothing but a swamp. They diverted the water, and when they did that, they accomplished two things. They cut off the Babylonians' water supply. That's one. But that wasn't the thing that got them. When they diverted the water come down. Darius the Mede marched his army up that riverbed, right under those bars, and into the city. While they're in there having the party of their life, drinking from the vessel stolen from the temple and blaspheming God. This happened at the same time. In the middle of that party, Darius the Mede comes in there and runs a dagger, a spear, through Belshazzar. And now the Medes and the Persians are in control. And so where this is right at the base of the neck, where the head of gold ends. And the shoulders that Daniel said are silver, they represent the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay? Now,
And that would be what today, the countries, Persia and Mede.
I think the wise men that come to visit baby Jesus were Persians.
Which is what?
It's I guess you could call it not the Far East, but the Near East. It would be the edge of China.
The
Persians were Iraq.
And the Medes but all of that, John, is over there in that area. Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Poland, Russia, China, all of that. That's the area. And so the Medo-Persian Empire, it was a combination of the Medes and the Persians. So it was huge. But Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that the second empire would be inferior to his. Inferior. And each one of these empires is inferior to the other as we go down through here. Now, what we will see next time is Daniel in the lion's den. After we get through Daniel chapter 6 and we begin in chapter 7, then you get into the rest of the way of the book. You get into some serious prophetic scriptures.
So Daniel had to be pretty old when they threw him in the lions. didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he was an old man. But now, Daniel went through a lot. People back then, if they were not under oppression, they lived longer than we do now. Now, the Hebrews were carried away into Babylonian captivity. But Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego, they were given the best of everything. I mean, they lived like rich men. So once they made it up that far to King's court, and Nebuchadnezzar made Daniel he called him the head magician. All right, Daniel, I don't think appreciated that, but I mean, he put him in charge. And so what I'm saying is, they could have lived a good life and were not suppressed, and were fed good, and could have lived a long life. Apparently, they did. Daniel did. So, but anyway, everybody.
The people of Israel are protesting now because the government is trying to weaken the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
That anywhere in
Suppressing the Jews, oppressing the Jews, fighting against the Jews, discriminating against the Jews. It's happened from the beginning, and it's not going to stop until that stone, you see there on the bottom of your page, the stone that struck the image and became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. I wrote Daniel 2:45 right there. In Daniel 2:45, Daniel talked about at the end of Nebuchadnezzar's vision, he saw a stone not cut with hands come down and crush every empire, beginning from the bottom all the way back to the top, and crushed every empire on the earth. That stone is the Lord Jesus Christ. When he comes back in Revelation 16 to fight the battle of Armageddon, the Bible tells us that all nations will gather themselves together to wipe out Israel. ALL, all nations.
the blood will flow as deep as the rod of a horse.
And as bad as I hate to say this, America, North America, South America, they're not mentioned in the prophecy.
That's not good.
It's one of two reasons. America, the United States of America, is a world power. There's one of two reasons it's not mentioned in prophecy. Either it's insignificant and it's no longer a world power, or it's one of the nations that gathers with the rest of them to conquer Israel. Either way, as much as I love America, when that horn blows and the good Lord picks me up out of here and takes me away from it, it's going to be a wonderful day.
Amen to that.
We're not going to